What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we'll be comparing a used Samsung Galaxy S10 to a new Samsung Galaxy A71 to see which device might be the better value. Now, with each comparison video I make, I feel like the choices just keep getting tougher and tougher. And I think this is probably the most competitive matchup I've had on the channel yet. What we have here is a barely one-year-old flagship device that's depreciated some 50% from its launch price, up against the current high-end new A-series phone from Samsung, which, if you don't know, it's their sort of budget and mid-range lineup. I think both of these phones are really solid options, but I think it's going to really come down to a handful of major differences in each phone that you might personally value. So let's go ahead and see what these phones have to offer, and hopefully by the end, you'll be able to decide which one is right for you. In regards to the price, you might be surprised to know that they're actually pretty close. Obviously, when the S10 was new last year, it was expensive, around $800, but in just 1 year's time, it's depreciated heavily, and you can pick up a renewed S10 from Amazon right now for under $450. That is just a ridiculous price for this phone, and I think it's reason enough already to consider it. But the A71 comes in at a pretty competitive price point too. It was released just a couple of months ago and sells right now actually for a little under $400 now. I think $380, right around there. This is the cheapest I've found on Amazon so far. But either way you look at it, these phones are only about $75 apart, which in my opinion isn't a whole lot. But if you're looking to get one phone strictly because of the price, I think the S10 with its crazy discount is hard to pass up. If you're interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, or maybe you want to buy one of these phones for yourself, I will have links to these phones at their cheapest prices down below in the video description. So check down there so you don't miss out. Physically, at least at first glance, these phones appear sort of similar, but actually the differences in material and obviously in size too are pretty significant. The much larger 6.7-inch A71 is actually constructed from all plastic. The shiny finish and polished edges are just made to mimic glass and metal, but the mid-range A-series phones get the lower quality materials. The S10, on the other hand, is a true flagship device, so it gets the premium glass and metal build as expected. Size-wise though, the 6.1-inch form factor is dwarfed by the A71, though I think this is something that's a matter of opinion. I like the S10's smaller size. I think it's really easy to use and handle, but I know a lot of people prefer those big huge screens too, and it's tough to find anything bigger than the A71 right now at this price point. Overall, I think both phones are built well and look good too, but obviously you're getting a more premium feel with the S10. Fortunately, the A71 doesn't feel cheap at all, but if you're picky about materials, the difference is something you'll feel right away. The flagship build of the S10 is just tough to give up. Taking a look around at everything else, these are both Samsung phones, of course, so they're designed in a similar way. You've got your volume and power buttons on the sides, and an additional Bixby button on the S10. Both phones do offer expandable storage via an SD card, which is nice, and down below there's a headphone jack and USB-C port on both. But there's a couple other differences I want to point out. First off, the edges of these phones are a little different. The S10 has that slight curve in the display, while the A71 is an all-flat panel. There are no additional features or added benefits with either choice. It's just, once again, more of a matter of personal preference. And there's also a difference in external speakers too. The A71 has just the one single speaker down below, while the S10 has a dual stereo speaker setup with an additional one in the earpiece. This means that the S10 sounds better, gets louder, and overall offers the nicer out loud listening experience. Nothing wrong with the A71 per se, but the S10 just offers more here. What's also interesting is that in regards to the display, these phones each sort of come from different chapters in Samsung's book. The S10 at the time went with a unique placement with the camera cutout, something we've never really seen again, while the A71 is back with a centered camera placement. I think, again, this is just more a matter of personal preference, but to me, the setup just makes more sense on the A71. The cutout also seems a tiny bit smaller too, and I think that off-center setup with the S10 is probably the one thing that gives away this phone's age. Underneath the display, both phones offer an in-display fingerprint reader. Now, with the S10, this was actually the first time Samsung did offer it on their flagship phones. performance, while the A71 comes at a time where every Samsung phone since has had it. But you might be surprised to know that they're pretty similar as far as their speed and accuracy. The older S10 I think offers a good fingerprint reader, all things considered, and the A71 isn't the best by 2020 standards, but it's still usable. The S10 might actually be a little faster at times, but both phones have a pretty similar setup here. Something that's very different with these phones, though, is the actual display technology. The larger 6.7-inch A71 offers a great-looking Super AMOLED Plus screen, but its resolution is just 2400 by 1080 and packs 393 pixels per inch. It's a great viewing experience on its own, especially for the price, but it's just not enough to compete with the S20. This is, of course, a flagship phone after all, and with that you get a higher resolution 3040 by 1440 Super AMOLED display that packs in 550 pixels per inch in its much smaller form factor. Now, I think side by side, these phones do look great. AMOLED is the way to go, and you've got the really nice punchy color and deep blacks that makes your content stand out. But when we start to analyze the little details and clarity, obviously the higher resolution S20 has the edge. I know not everyone will pixel peek and analyze these things so closely, but if you do, the difference here is pretty apparent. Still, I think this mainly just shows how good the A71 is, honestly. This is a phone, after all, that sells new for under $400. And honestly, it has a display that can compete with the $1,000 phones of 2019 and even 2020 as well, for that matter. When it comes to performance, I think this is probably where a lot of people are super curious. Now, what we're dealing with, obviously, is just two separate class of specs: flagship and mid-range. So with the A71, this phone has the relatively new Snapdragon 730 series chipset, the Adreno 618 GPU, and either 6 gigs or 8 gigs of RAM. At least for right now in 2020, those are sort of the top of the line mid-range specs that are available. On the other hand, the S20 packs last year's Snapdragon 855 processor, Adreno 640 GPU, and 8 gigs of RAM as its only option. Obviously, these were top of the line flagship specs for 2019. And with a side-by-side comparison, what you'll find is these phones are actually super close. The S20 does tend to have the advantage more often, but once again, this just goes to show how quickly Samsung has been able to offer a mid-range $400 phone that's as good as the flagships of 2019. Both phones, of course, have Android 10 and One UI 2, so you're getting the latest OS and smoothest experience. And performance-wise, it's sort of a twofold thing. The S10 is only a year old, and this is a device that hasn't seen any issues at all. It hasn't dropped off at all. It isn't significantly worse than the flagships of 2020. It's still, for all intents and purposes, an amazing flagship phone that can handle anything. And by extension, the A71 is the newest and most highly equipped mid-range phone from Samsung right now. And with that, you're getting a great experience too. The big thing to consider, I think, is just the long-term viability of each device. I think you'll probably get one additional year of software support on the A71, since it is about a year newer of a device. But I think the Snapdragon 855 on the S10 might be able to keep up for longer. It's a super tough choice to make, but for me, I think I value those true flagship specs more, even if they are a year old now. And when it comes to battery life, I think what's interesting to note is that the A71 appears to have the advantage, both in capacity and in real-world use. The A71 has a larger 4500 mAh battery inside versus the 3400 mAh one in the S10. Obviously, the A71 has the bigger display, which takes up a bit more power, but the S20 has a higher resolution display and more powerful internal specs, all paired with a lower capacity battery. Neither phone has any issues getting through the day, but I found that the A71 can yield an extra hour or two by the end over the S10. And interestingly enough, when it comes to plugging in, the A71 does support the new 25-watt super fast charging standard, while the S10 has just the 15-watt supported. So you'll be ready to go more quickly with the A71 if you do run out of juice. A couple other things to note: with the S10 being a flagship, there aren't really any compromises. So that means you've got an IP68 water resistance rating and wireless charging support, as well as reverse wireless charging too. The A71 doesn't offer any of that. So if those little added bonuses and extra features are at all valuable to you, the S10 is the way to go. Finally, let's talk cameras, because once again, I think this is where a lot of people are interested. The S10 packs, I think, the perfect setup. There's a 12 megapixel variable aperture main lens, a 12 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. There isn't anything here that's missing in my opinion, and no gimmicky extras either. Paired with the flagship internals like the 855 processor, you're getting a picture and video taking device that was probably a top 5 phone last year. With all the extra shooting modes and features, there wasn't a whole lot to complain about, and I think this is still a phone that holds up today. What Samsung has focused a lot of their energy on though, with their smartphones, both flagship and mid-range, is the camera setup, and that's something that shows on the A71. This phone has a quad camera setup, a 64 megapixel main lens, 12 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro for up close photography, and a 5 megapixel depth sensor. Now, I do think the A71 is a great picture and video taker, especially in its price range as a new device. The macro lens is not something I value personally, and I kind of miss a telephoto lens too, but there's nothing to complain about. And with a 64 megapixel lens, there's the potential to capture a ton of extra detail. But the internal specs that process the images don't necessarily yield as good of a result when compared to the S10. And I believe we're still dealing with a lower end camera module and sensor too anyway. While the A71 can certainly hold its own, I think the S10 still has the advantages here too. And it's a similar story with the front facing cameras as well. The A71 actually has the better specs on paper, a 32 megapixel lens versus the S10's 10 megapixel shooter. But I still think the S10 can usually process the image better and yield a nicer looking result. Though to be totally honest, I don't think either phones take particularly great selfies anyway. So to sum things up, I honestly think both these phones are great, and you're going to be happy either way you go. I will say this though, the S10 offers a better display, a nicer build, higher specs, and a better camera overall, while the A71 still beats it on price, screen size, and battery capacity. If it wasn't clear already though, my choice is the S10. I just can't pass up the flagship phone at such an insane discount. But what do you guys think? Which phone would you choose, the S10 or the A71? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.